Will tomorrow be better is a very easy question to answer. Unfortunately, it's very easy to answer yes, and it's very easy to answer no. You can answer yes if you think about miracles of biotechnology. You can answer no if you think about growing income inequality. The truth is, tomorrow will be better or it will be worse depending on how we respond to a variety of threats. Now, if you think about how we've responded to threats in the past, you notice that we've responded to some quite well and some quite poorly. Take the threat of global terrorism. There is no doubt that we've made great progress in the war on terror, in this country especially, in my country, the United States as well. There's no chance that terrorists will ever wipe out the human race, and we've made progress on this front. Consider the problem of global warming, exactly the opposite. This is a problem on massive scale, a problem that really does threaten our entire species, and if we've made any progress in the last 10 years or so, it's progress backwards. So the question is, why do we respond? Why do we as human beings respond to some threats so well and some threats so poorly? And the answer, of course, is that we're human beings and we have a human brain, and we've evolved over millions of years to respond to threats that have 4 very specific features. I'm going to show you terrorism has all 4 of these features. Climate change has none. What are these 4 features? These 4 features are intentionality, immorality, imminence, and instantaneousness. The brain cares about these 4 things. Any threat that has these features is a threat we respond to well. Any threat that lacks them goes right in under the brain's radar. Consider just intentionality to begin. So most of you know that different parts of your brain do different things. The brain devotes special areas to very important things that we do. So back here we have vision. Right over here on the left we have language, because seeing and talking are extraordinarily important. The brain has no area for shopping, because shopping isn't nearly as important as vision and language. Now, what we've discovered in the last 20 years or so is that the brain devotes specific networks to understanding other human minds. Particular areas of your brain are devoted to understanding what others think, what they want, what they're planning, what they're hoping for. All I have to do is raise my eyebrow by 1 millimeter, and if you're close enough, you instantly know what's on my mind. Now, it turns out that having a network in your brain that responds to what other people are thinking and what other people are doing has some interesting consequences. So, for example, it makes us hyper-vigilant for signs of human agency. We see faces in all of these common objects. Here's a point light display. These are just lights moving, but most of you see them as a human being walking towards you. We know that you will remember a tune better if you hear it hummed by a human voice than if you hear it played by a violin. That's because the human brain is obsessed with all things human. Now, that's why we see faces in the clouds, but we never see clouds in faces. But it's also why we care very much about underwear bombers, who the annual death toll from underwear bombers is roughly 0, and we don't care much about the flu. The flu kills about 400,000 people a year. That's why we care about our children being abducted by strangers and child molesters, but not about them becoming obese, even though obesity and diabetes are very real threats and stranger abduction is extraordinarily rare. Terrorists and child molesters and kidnappers, these are human agents, and our brain is built to respond to them. Viruses and French fries, these are objects, and we just can't get very worked up about the threat they pose. Here's an example. Just 2 months ago in my city of Boston, we had a bomb, and this bomb went off at the Boston Marathon, and it killed 3 people. And we shut down our city for 2 days to create a great manhunt and find the men responsible. 3 people died. That same week, 4 people died in a fishing accident, 5 people died in an avalanche, 15 people died when a fertilizer plant blew up, 186 died in China from an earthquake, and over 1,000 in Bangladesh. And if you ask anyone in my country what happened in the week of April 16th, they say the Boston bombing. And that's because the Boston bombing wasn't just a dangerous thing. It didn't just kill people. It was an act of evil. And evil is a thing that triggers the neural alarm system. This is an iconic picture for Americans, but I guarantee you that if this plane had been hit by lightning, nobody in this room could tell me the date on which it happened. So here's the point. Climate change is not trying to kill us, and that's too bad. Because if climate change were an evil plot visited upon us by a bad man with a mustache, we would have a war on global warming right now. We would be relinquishing our civil rights to change the environment rather than simply to fight terrorism. Now, the second point I want to make is about morality. These are two faces you know well. These are the faces of disgust and the faces of anger. And disgust and anger are very unusual emotions because they are usually emotions that are reactions to moral violations, violations of moral rules. Now, if you analyze the moral rules of different societies, you see that they have something in common. Almost all of them are about the kinds of things that small bands of hunter-gatherers living on the African savanna would care about as they seek mates and food and shelter. In other words, moral rules are generally about food and sex. If I come to Israel, I find there is a moral rule that prohibits me from eating a dog and prohibits me from kissing a man. Most societies have moral rules about what we can eat and what we can do sexually and romantically. Almost none of them have moral rules about atmospheric chemistry. So I can't kiss a man, I can't eat a dog, but no moral rule about whether I can turn up the air conditioning in the King David Hotel. Global warming makes us worry, but global warming doesn't make us feel nauseous. It doesn't make us feel dishonored. It doesn't make us feel disrespected. And so we just can't get worked up about it like we do with other major threats to Western civilization, like gay marriage, flag burning, that sort of thing. Now, the third thing about the human brain to know is that it's very good at reacting to certain kinds of threats. As you'll see in this video, okay, there is a man who reacted very quickly, a human brain doing what the brain was built to do. The human brain is essentially a get-out-of-the-way machine. It's very good at getting out of the way of things that it sees coming. Now, about 4 or 5 million years ago, the brain learned a new trick. It learned to get out of the way of things that weren't yet coming, things that were going to be coming in the future. But our ability to do this trick, to look into the future and think about things to come, is a very new ability evolutionarily. This part of the brain that's gray is the part of your brain that's devoted to thinking about the here and now, and the part that's orange is the part that's devoted to thinking about tomorrow. This much for today, this much for the rest of eternity. Our ability to think about the future is brand new. It's an ability that's in many ways still in beta testing. And so we can't be too surprised that it doesn't always work so well. Terrorism is a threat today. Climate change is a threat to all of our tomorrows. And we just can't get worked up about the things that lay in the future like we do about things in the present. Surely, if you knew the date on which your country would become uninhabitable due to climate change, you, like me, would be out there doing something about it instead of sitting in this comfortable, highly air-conditioned auditorium thinking. Now, finally, the human brain is extraordinarily sensitive to changes, very sensitive to changes in size, changes in temperature, changes in weight, changes in light, but it is not sensitive to these changes if they happen very slowly. If a change is slow, it can be massive and still go undetected. For example, right now you probably think you're looking at a photograph, but you're not. You're watching a movie. And in the course of this movie, something very important is changing. But that change is slow, and so your brain can't see it. Let me rewind the movie and you'll see it. Look at the lower corner, the lower right-hand corner of the picture. There you go. That's what was changing as you watched. But very few of you saw an entire field of alfalfa disappearing before your eyes because it was happening slowly enough. 1988, 2008, pictures of me. This doesn't happen overnight, okay? Baldness happens one hair at a time. And if you don't have a camera and you don't have a wife, you might never even know you've gone bald. If I'd woken up this way someday in 1988, I would have gone running to the doctor and said, "Oh my God, what happened?" But one hair at a time, I got used to it, and I barely even noticed the change. So we accept changes that are gradual that we would absolutely reject if they were abrupt. Now, this is the state of the environment right now. Most of these pictures they're normal pictures from a magazine, but they could also have been from a science fiction movie in the year I was born. The impurity of water, the impurity of air has increased dramatically in my lifetime, but I have tolerated it, as have all my fellow citizens, because it happens a day at a time. Look, when environmental disasters happen suddenly, we do worry about them. When we spill 10,000 barrels of oil in a day, everybody's upset. When we spill 1 barrel every day for 10,000 days, nobody seems to care. My friends who are environmentalists say that they lament the fact that global warming is happening so quickly, but I'm a psychologist, and for me the problem is it's not happening nearly quickly enough. Because it's happening so slowly, it's creating changes that we accept. Terrorist acts, of course, are exactly the opposite. They happen in a heartbeat, don't they? If this building had fallen down 1 floor every month for 100 months, none of us would be able to name it. But it happened very quickly, and so the brain's alarm bells are tripped, and we have a visceral reaction. So what's the point of all of this? The point is that everybody here is the progeny of people for whom the greatest threat to their well-being was a man with a stick who had come to take their food and capture their women. That's what our ancestors were worried about, and our brains evolved to respond to those sorts of threats quite beautifully. When confronted with threats of that sort, we respond with crushing force and firm resolve, just like our ancestors would have. Terrorism presses all of the buttons. Threats like climate change press none. So will tomorrow be better? Well, if we choose our battles the way our ancestors chose their battles, there is no doubt that tomorrow we will be bleak. But if, on the other hand, we can use this new part of our brain to think through whether a threat actually is a danger, not just whether it offends us, not just whether it's an act of evil, but whether it's actually a danger, I think our tomorrow can be quite bright. Thank you.